This video is a depiction of a tragedy on the map Two Brothers, although there is a silver lining. We're playing the Tier 7 Premium French Battleship Champagne, which I believe was a previous campaign reward, and when it came out, I think my review on the ship said something along the lines of, "This glass of champagne is sour." I didn't like the ship very much at all at the time when it was released, but since then, it has been buffed in a way that I think massively improves the experience. Upon release, the Champagne had something like 40,000 hit points, which, for a battleship, is a pretty pathetic HP pool. It's more in line with Tier 7 cruisers than battleships. Well, that was buffed. Now the Champagne has 54,240 hit points, and it's a lot more usable because of that. So that's one good thing. The second thing is they added 2 charges of the main battery reload booster like the Jean Bar. The Champagne has 6 16-inch guns, bigger than the French usually have, and they are quite accurate at distance. Plus, because they're French, the penetration is excellent. So these two things together have made this ship more fun to play, or at least more effective. But it does still have its one major downside that really prevented me from liking the ship in the first place, and that feeds into the tragedy that we're about to see unfold. But it's not going to become clear to you until the end of the game, so I suppose we should just call the shots as they happen, because look at all the divisions in this game, first of all. I think one division is composed of 3 battleships, and on the red team, they're going down the center. This is not a good thing for them to do. I don't think, generally speaking, you want to take 3 battleships and drive them down the channel in Two Brothers. You're limiting your firepower, first and foremost. Battleships tend to have guns on both the bow end and the stern end of the ship, and if you're sailing up a narrow channel like the one in the middle of Two Brothers, then by the time you get to the end, you're really only going to be using your front 2 turrets. That might be fine for something like the Jean Bar, that's one of the ships that's going down the center, but for something like the Vanguard, it starts to make a lot less sense, and that's another one of the ships going down the center. By the way, there we get punished for our own obliviousness, turning broadside in front of a Vittorio Veneto, which doesn't often have the consistency to land that kind of a shot at that kind of range, but of course, RNGesus bestowed favor upon that red player, and he citadeled us. Now we're down to about half health. But hey, it would have been worse if this was Champagne pre-buff. In any case, we cannot push into the Veneto and whatever else might be on this flank. The Champagne still carries the one weakness that I alluded to earlier, which is that even though the HP is buffed, this is still a squishy ship with a small HP pool for a battleship. It also has French armor, which is not a benefit. Okay, French armor means that this ship is coated everywhere in 32 millimeters. Now, 32 millimeters is a significant value. It can't be overmatched by anything we see in this game, although if we find ourselves facing a Musashi at Tier 8, of course, he can overmatch us everywhere, but barring Musashi, nobody else can, meaning we can angle this 32 millimeter plating against battleships, but the problem is the geography or the surfaces of the ship. Even if you have it angled, because the armor is so thin, 32 millimeters, the enemy is still probably going to get full penetration damage depending on where their shells land. And you only have 6 guns, one on the front, one on the back, so if you're pushing into ships, you're probably limiting your firepower. By the way there, though, the Champagne's HE must have some pretty good characteristics. Triple fire on that Veneto. It's a shame we're not going to get to follow that up with another fire. RNGesus, I guess, gave us all of our RNG in that single salvo. 3 fires. We're going to get 0 fires as we continue to fire HE at this reversing Veneto. But anyway, due to the small HP pool and the lack of robust armor. If we push in, we will get melted quickly. And that's to say nothing of cruisers. There really aren't any cruisers in this game, so it's not something we have to worry about. But in games with cruisers, if you find yourself facing heavy cruisers with 203mm guns, or light cruisers running the equilibrium of power skill, they can penetrate the Champagne's armor scheme literally everywhere except the turrets and the belt armor protecting the Citadel, which means if you want to push into HE spam in this particular battleship, you will melt a lot faster than even other battleships. But thus far, we've been biding our time, shooting HE at the Bismarck and the Veneto on this flank, while we waited for the Jean Bar, the Vanguard, and I think also the Iowa to reach the mouth of the channel. They have now, and to their credit, this is providing a fairly large distraction for my team. I haven't really left my spawn. I think if these guys weren't going up the center, I probably would have left it, maybe pushed down the flank a little bit more. Obviously, we couldn't push straight into both the Bismarck and the Veneto, we would just get melted. But still, I probably would have pushed out a little bit more and not hung back so much. I suspect the same would be true for the two blue battleships that we can see occupying the friendly base. I think both of them are sitting there waiting for this brigade of 3 battleships to come through the center. And you could see when the Jean Bar did, he made the cardinal error that people who want to push down the channel in Two Brothers often make. Usually, if you're going to push down Two Brothers, especially right at the start of the game, you're going to be met with opposition in the enemy cap circle, and it's very easy for the enemy to take up positions on either side of the mouth of the channel. If they do, and you push your ship outside of the mouth of the channel, you're going to be exposing broadside to whatever is waiting for you. The Jean Bar got hit pretty hard by our shells, and he's decided to just full send it at this point. I don't know if he got impatient and didn't want to wait in the mouth of the channel any longer, but this is going to lead to his demise. He takes torpedoes from one of our teammates. The torpedoes continue to travel past him. Perhaps they'll hit either the Vanguard or Iowa, but it doesn't look likely. And already the Jean Bar is gone. We do get a torpedo hit, or our teammate does, on the Vanguard, who is also broadside to us, and as we know, the Vanguard is quite a squishy ship. We hit him there with 5 of our 6 shells, no Citadels, though. We didn't lead the shot properly, so we missed the Citadel, but our battleship teammate managed to find it, and the Vanguard is dead. So 2 out of 3 of this battleship brigade, which I think is a division of triple battleships, is now toast. Actually, I think the Vanguard's still floating, and he did manage to get a heal off, but he's essentially been crippled. The Iowa, the last to come out of that mouth of the channel, is at basically full health, and unfortunately, whatever was fighting these guys, I think it was a destroyer that launched the torpedoes, has somehow managed to get sunk by the 3 battleships, which could be because of the aircraft carrier on the enemy team. It's a Kaga. He's going to come into play a little bit later and is going to be key to the tragedy that plays out. But at this point, my teammates' numbers have been thinned out. It's 4 versus 5. The enemy team still has a destroyer, and 3 of the remaining ships are battleships. They're all pushing for the cap. One of them goes down, but we still got a mostly full health Veneto and an Iowa. The other friendly battleship is in the cap with the 2 of them. He's on low HP. And our remaining cruiser, the Congress, which, by the way, I am going to do a video on that ship. I was going to actually do it today, but I don't have footage that I'm happy with yet, so this is why you're seeing this tragedy, which hopefully is an interesting enough game. In any case, the Congress is nearly toast. The Veneto goes down, but the Iowa is still quite healthy, pushing straight toward the Congress. And the Congress does have 27 millimeters of armor everywhere, so the Iowa can overmatch him and take him out. Meanwhile, our last remaining battleship takes some torpedoes courtesy of the Kaga and goes down. So it's 3v3 now, fairly even in terms of ship count, but the Iowa's presence in our cap circle is stopping our accrual of points. And now the enemy team is ahead of us. The Iowa is, I think, playing it fairly smart at this point. He is not pushing out of the cap circle, which is exactly the right move. He wants to stay on it for as long as humanly possible, because as long as he's on it, we're not going to accrue points. We're going to be stuck at 311 points, while the enemy continues to overtake us because nobody is inside of their cap contesting it. I think the Congress gets a nice fire on the Iowa, and we ourselves have switched to the HE, which I think is probably the more effective choice when a battleship like this is bow tanking. We could aim for superstructure, of course, but fire damage, dealing dots, damage over time, is going to be, I think, a little bit more effective, provided we can get the fires, but RNG doesn't seem to be on our side. The Congress is still floating, but I don't think for much longer. One of these shots here, courtesy of the Iowa, is going to take him out, and I think it's that shot. Since the Iowa gave us a little bit more angle, we do switch back to the HP, or AP rather, and we don't take him out, but we get him low enough that the Congress's fire is enough to sink him, and that cruiser, now deceased, earns its just a flesh wound medal. And at this point, the game, I think, would be entirely winnable. All we have left is the aircraft carrier, which is a Kaga. That is the major problem. And the enemy destroyer, which is an Elbing. Potentially a problem, but less of a problem. At least in terms of torpedoes. The Elbings are, well, they hit hard, and they're very stealthy, but they're also very slow. I think actually some ships go faster than the Elbing's torpedoes. Probably not the Champagne, even with the engine boost running, but still, easier to dodge the slower they are. So with just the Elbing, I think we could have pushed into him, especially with the help of our CV providing spotting. That's the only reason we were able to shoot at the Elbing there and gain ourselves the Confederate medal. But because the enemy also has a CV, and because that CV is a Kaga, we're going to be in trouble. We have 31,684 HP left, and while the Champagne is a French battleship, it probably has pretty decent AA. There's really nothing you can do if a carrier is going to focus you. You can turn into their torpedoes, of course, if they drop them, and we do miss all the Kaga torpedoes there, so that's good. We are taking down his planes. He's still able to get off a second drop, but we'll be able to dodge that as well because he's coming from the stern rather than the broadside, so that does make it easier to dodge. We have to be concerned about the Elbing torpedoes and Elbing AP, but crucially, the Elbing is making what I think is a gigantic error. There's zero reason to shoot HE from the Elbing at the broadside of a Champagne. If that guy was shooting AP at me, he'd probably be chunking me for like 4 or 5k a salvo. With his HE, he's getting maybe like 2k at the best, 3k maybe at the absolute highest. The Elbing's HE is trash. If you have a broadside battleship to shoot at in that destroyer, and you shoot HE, I hate to tell you this, but you're doing it wrong. The Elbing continues to shoot HE. Bit of a better idea now that I'm bow in. His HE can penetrate my 32mm of armor, being German. But here comes the Kaga again, and this time he's got our broadside. We're unable to really dodge this one, and here we see the problem, the reason I don't like CVs. That's an instant crossfire that the Kaga was able to set up. If the Kaga were another DD, he would have to be far enough away from me to be unspotted to launch his torpedoes, or if he was close enough to me to be spotted, I'd be able to shoot back at him and damage him. But because he's a carrier, he can just drop his torpedoes on my broadside with no risk to his HP, create an instant crossfire, and make me choose between dodging his torpedoes or the Elbings, which, ultimately I can't do. So I go down, and we lose the game, very tragically. Two brothers. What an interesting time. Despite the fact that 3 battleships went up the middle and accomplished basically nothing, we still lose that game. This is World of Warships Legends. Hope you enjoyed this video. If so, give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.